Welcome everyone to our first 2024 virtual coffee hour. We're thrilled to have some new faces and so many old faces. I see a number of CultureWorks grantees and other partners out there. It's great to see you. For those of you that I haven't met yet, my name is Scott Garka. I'm the president of CultureWorks. Catherine Thompson leads our all of our community engagement work, but unfortunately, she is unable to join us today, or might be joining us a little bit later. So she asked me to kick off today's meeting. For those that don't know CultureWorks is an independent nonprofit that our mission is to strengthen artists and arts and culture nonprofit organizations, like many of you on this call. And we do that a number of ways. We have a grant making program, and I will make a plug for that. That applications for our annual grant cycle will be opening on February 1st. And Shelby Finkelstein from our team has a number of information sessions over the next couple of weeks. I encourage you to check out our Facebook and Instagram page, where we've got links to be able to register for those free sessions. But then we also offer a number of non-financial support vehicles like this virtual coffee hour. And so today, our first topic of 2024 is about artist residencies. And we have Jordan Brown, the executive director of the Visual Arts Center, joining us to share with us more about what the Visual Arts Center does, their programs, but also specifically about their artist residency programs and why they're important to their organization and can be helpful for arts and culture organizations in general. With that, and I will remind everyone, keep your microphones on mute, but feel free to raise your hand if you have questions. Raise your hand using either the chat feature. I guess put your questions into the chat feature, please, and then we'll try and raise those to Jordan throughout her presentation. With that, I'll turn it over to you, Jordan. Thanks again for joining us.
Thanks, Scott, and good morning, everybody. Yes to questions throughout the presentation, and then I'm sure we'll have time at the end as well. So happy to have more of a discussion after I tell you all about our residency programs and why we think they're important for us and beyond. Yeah, so my name is Jordan Brown. I've been here at the Visual Arts Center for about 12 years now, and have been in this role of executive director for a little less than a year. But previous to that, I ran a lot of our programs, and that included supporting these residency programs and kind of getting some of them off the ground. So I'm excited to talk with you about them today. I think I want to kind of get started by just as briefly as I can explaining what the Visual Arts Center does, because I think it gives a lot of context into why we offer residency programs and why they've been so mutually beneficial for us and for the artists. So this is our vision statement: art for everyone, creativity for life. And our mission statement is to celebrate and support the creative life of all people through art making, exhibitions, and community programs. We serve around 40,000 people a year through all the different things that we do. And we are a very small but mighty organization and have a lot of things going on every day. So I'm going to kind of walk you through what that looks like. To give a little bit of history, we were founded 60 years ago in 1963 by a woman named Elizabeth Scott Bocock as the Hand Workshop. And we existed under that name for a long time. So many people still know us as the Hand Workshop. But in 2007 and 2008, we moved into the location we're in now on West Main Street here in Richmond. And it is a beautiful 30,000 square foot facility, a former dairy bottling plant that was converted through a capital campaign to be what it is now. And our building is really key to our identity and also really important to our residency programs. So this is how the mission statement breaks down. We kind of do 5 big things, if I can put them in 5 big buckets. One is we do studio art classes for students of all ages. We start as young as 3 and go all the way up. We have a gallery in the center of our facility called the True F. Luck Gallery, and we offer exhibitions year-round. many of which come from our own programs, including our residency programs. But we also invite around, usually we have one solo show and one group show every year as well from regional and national artists. We do a lot of free community programs. So we raise funds to be able to offer arts education programming to different groups in the city, like after school programs for K through 12 youth, programs for individuals with disabilities, military veterans, and others. Of course, what we're going to talk today is artist residencies and studio programs. So we'll get into that later. And then we also do some really big, fun community events. Our biggest one that just happened a couple months ago is Craft and Design, and that's been going on now for 59 years. We started it a year into our operation, and it's a way for us to highlight crafts artists from around the country who come together and put up booths and sell their work. It's down at Main Street Station. It's one of my favorite things that we do. So if you've never checked it out, please check it out. I mentioned our facility and how important it is to us and to what we do. We couldn't offer classes if we didn't have these very specialized studios. So I mentioned we have about 17 of them throughout the building. Each one is kind of media specific and designed to really meet the needs of the material that it supports. So we offer everything from clay, a fiber studio, metals. We have a stained glass and fused glass studio, flame working, letterpress, printmaking, digital, photography, drawing, and painting. And I'm probably forgetting some. And those studios we try to have them be as professionally equipped as possible and sort of meeting the best practices of the industry in that media. What I love about our studios too is we don't have kids studios versus adult studios. All classes take place in the same space. So, kids are using the same sewing machines and soldering guns and wheels that adults are using. We offer about 1,500 classes a year. We have, I think, close now to 230 teachers on our roster who work with us to offer those. And we do them in all sorts of different formats, from one-day workshops to 8-week classes. And a big part of our educational model too is that we try to make it accessible. So we try to make the price points reasonable for folks in our community. And then we also offer a financial aid program that lowers the cost of our classes based on your income. And that usually results in us giving away about $30,000 a year in financial aid. So I wanted to call that out as a way to, look at our classes. If the price points in the past have seemed high, we have a way to make it work for people. The gallery I mentioned already. An additional program we have in our gallery is called Engage, and it's a way for us to invite groups, both school groups and just, groups from our community to come through and get a docent-led tour of the exhibition that's on view. And then we design free workshops in the studios that sort of align and coordinate with the concepts and media of each exhibition. And again, that's offered completely free to the community. We usually serve around 2,000 kids and adults through that program. I won't go super in detail with our community partnership programs, but we have a lot of them, and they are a really important part of the way that we meet our mission. So Art After School, we offer around 20 classes a year, serve around 500 kids, and they come here after school and take free art classes in our studios. Make Space is an arts-based mentoring program we do with 6th grade girls living in the East End who attend Anna Julia Cooper School. We work with older adults through a program called Studio S. And we've been working now for about 7 years with the VA hospital in Southside, and now serve around 200 veterans a year with free programs and workshops as well. These are some of our special events. I've mentioned the biggest one. We have a gala as well called Collectors Night, and we also have something called Chili Throwdown, which is basically an empty bowl fundraiser where ceramicists donate beautiful handmade bowls, and for every ticket that you buy in, you get to get one of those and then help us name a Chili Throwdown winner from local restaurants. It's really fun. It's in October. Studio Access has become a really big program for us. It was only started about 5 years ago. And we were thinking about the fact that really our studios at the time were only open to students taking classes, and there were all these hours in the day where nothing was happening in those spaces. And we just kept thinking, we have all this beautiful equipment, we have all of this time, like, let's try to open it up to people. And so we started to offer the ability for people to just rent by the hour or by the month and be able to come in when the studios were available, as a way to work independently. And a lot of students do this after they've taken an intro class. A lot of artists do this just to get access to equipment that they can't have at their homes. And this sort of paved the way, I think, for us thinking about residencies differently, because it really showed us that there was a need from local artists to be able to access these types of spaces and equipment, and that, you know, there's also this need to be within a space with other artists for finding community, starting conversations, and, you know, having a home studio is wonderful and beautiful if you can, but I think a lot of people miss that sort of connection from a group workspace. So this program really took off, and, you know, now we have hundreds of people who do this throughout the year, across all of our studio spaces. Okay, so now we're to the real meat of this presentation. So residencies at VisArts. We have 3 main residencies now. When I started here, we really just had one. And slowly we've grown now to the point where we have about 30 to 35 artists every year who can be called a resident of the Visual Arts Center. And we're really proud of that. We're really happy about that. These are how they break down. So the one that we started with was the exhibiting artist residency. So I mentioned our gallery. We're bringing in artists from, you know, all over to show in that space. And we made it a point to be able to offer our resources as an art center to the artist who was coming in to show, and give them the opportunity to make new work, to explore new processes, to learn from some of our artists. So it really varies by show. You know, we've had artists who have just come in for a few weeks and like, I want to learn how to, you know, cast a gold ring for this sculpture I'm making. And we're like, great, we'll figure that out. It'll take a few weeks. You can stay in our residency house and we'll make it happen. Or we have a show coming up this fall, and this resident will be with us. Her name's Veronica Jackson. She'll be staying with us for about 4 months after it's all said and done. And we'll have made, I think, about a third of the work in the show here at VisArts. So it just depends on the artist and where they're at in their career. So that one's really flexible. The next one we created was our annual residency. That one is basically a full year. It's 11 months. And that one is really meant to give a lot of focused support to a small group of artists. So it's offered to 3 visual artists and 1 creative writer. Each of the residents has their own private space in our building, and then they can also use, of course, the rest of the building throughout the day. They get a $5,000 honorarium to help offset some of the costs associated with spending time making art. It does not have housing, and, you know, it's not like that $5,000 stipend is a living wage, but we're trying to eventually work up to something more substantial like that. But for now, it's a way for artists to just be able to have a little more support, to have space and time to make their work. We also do things like private lessons for these artists, demonstrations in the studio so that they can make full use of all the media areas here and learn some new things. And the big thing with the annual residency is that it culminates in an exhibition in the gallery space, for the 3 visual artists. And for the writer, we usually do some sort of public event celebrating their work. And that, of course, comes with professional support, curatorial support, documentation of their work. Every exhibition in our space has a video that's made about the artist and has them speaking about their practice and about their process. And those videos, I know, have been a big boost to a lot of artists down the road as a way to share their work with other places besides us. And then the final residency program we have is called our Studio Access Residency. And I mentioned the Studio Access program. During COVID, our building was pretty shut down for about a year, and classes were half the size of what they were. They were, very limited. And so we were sitting in this big building that was very, very empty. And we came up with the idea that we would love to be able to have sort of like almost like an entry level residency where we are just basically offering up our entire space to artists for 6 months at a time. So that's what we did. So every 6 months, we bring in a cohort of about 15 artists. It's all application based. So is the annual residency, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. But that cohort model has been really beautiful and something that has evolved. We're now, I think, in the third or fourth year of that program. And it's been for VisArts, a real way for us to welcome in new artists who might not be ready for a full annual residency, might not be interested in taking a class, might not be ready to teach, but really want to make work and want to have access to a creative community. So yeah, so those are our three programs as they exist right now. Like I said, they're always evolving. From an organizational standpoint, we've been slowly trying to invest more resources into the residency. So I mentioned the history of kind of how this got going. We have in our facility about 8 or 9 private studios upstairs that previous to these residency programs were just privately rented by individuals in the community. And sort of as folks left, we just sort of held on to them and said, okay, we're going to transition this over to a residency. So we just sort of made the decision that that was a better use of that resource. Instead of collecting rent, we could, offer this up to artists, and we could raise funds to make up for that. The other big investment we've made to this program is that we purchased a residential property that's adjacent to VisArts. It's right down here on Main Street. It's on Allen Avenue, actually. It's a small, fan row home, and this house has allowed us to really make that exhibiting artist residency for those in the gallery really flexible and responsive to what they need, so that we can, have them come in for a month or 2 or 3 at a time, and stay with us and be right next door and have their own space. And so that was a big investment, and one we're really excited about. And it's still pretty new to us. We've only had this property for about a year. And so we're still figuring out all the ways that we can leverage it as we grow these programs. So a few lessons we've learned as we've been offering residencies. We, during the pandemic, made a shift in our sort of language and prioritization about our residency programs. Previously, the annual residency, which was our, the only other one that existed at the time, was just really aimed at emerging artists. And as an organization and as the board of directors and our staff, we decided that we wanted to sort of put a stake in the ground and say publicly and throughout the process of these application programs that we were going to prioritize applications from BIPOC artists. We were going to prioritize applications from other groups that have been historically marginalized or underrepresented. And we have followed through on that in a lot of small practical ways, from having very diverse juries, from reaching out to different communities to make sure that they know about these opportunities. So that was something that shifted sort of the goals of the program and how we thought about it. And again, it's just been a really beautiful way to connect with more artists and to have them connect with each other. Something else that has been really fun for us throughout this process is we've been able to respond to the interests and needs of these artists in the program. Like I said, we're a small staff, and even though we're a big building, we're able to get to know all these people. And so we end up in conversation with them a lot. So when we started the studio access residency, the 6-month one, we were like, oh, we're just going to give them access to the building and just let them run wild and like do what they want and call it a day. And then as we started working with the first cohort, they were like, we want to do skill shares. Like we want to learn how to work in these spaces. Like I've never, worked in the printmaking studio before, but I'd love to learn how to screen print. And so we started coordinating skill shares between the artists themselves. So like say one of the residents knows how to screen print and one doesn't, they can lead a skill share so that any resident who's interested can learn that process. And then for folks who wanted to learn something that the group didn't know how to do, we'll contract a teacher to teach a private class to those residents. And that lets them really make use of the space and get the most out of the residency that they possibly can. Another thing that we hadn't anticipated is the studio access residency. Again, we didn't have a lot of room in the calendar to give them their own exhibition, but there was a lot of interest from the first couple cohorts. And so our staff here responded to that and we're like, well, we can do a weekend pop-up exhibition or a week-long pop-up exhibition as long as y'all really help us pull it off. And so with each group, one of the residents is identified as the lead, and they organize an exhibition of works by the cohort and help, get it hung, come up with the marketing material, get the word out, and host the opening. And then something that we've just started to do is now that we have these 3 kind of residency programs, especially the annual and the studio access one, they are crossing paths a lot and want to connect. And so where we have identified one of our annual residents every 6 months will sort of be the lead resident, and they're going to coordinate critique nights or outings to other art centers or happy hours or just like ways to facilitate conversation and community connection, because it's a big group of people who all have different schedules and different interests, but they really want that ability to sort of, connect with each other. I think, I don't know in this group if we have folks who went to art school or didn't, but I think a lot of folks who come here, went to some sort of art school or had, a really great high school art education experience. And then like you leave and it's gone. And so you miss that, and you miss that sort of like collaborative atmosphere. So that's what we're trying to create with some of these things that we've put in place. I think I wanted to kind of end with this because I think sometimes when I speak to people who maybe aren't as embedded in the visual arts community or, aren't an insider with the language of residencies, they're like, what is a residency? Like, I don't get it. And I think that once you discover how many residency opportunities are out there across Richmond, across the country, it's really easy to see why they're so important. Like I mentioned, I think a lot of artists are trying to get started and don't know where to start. And I think residencies are a really good way to do that because it gives you, like I said, time and space to learn and work on your craft in a really focused way, without maybe having to juggle as much of your day-to-day life against it. So for us, I mean, residencies made so much sense for our mission. It made so much sense for our building, but for the artists, I think, residencies give them access to spaces and equipment that are hard to build on your own. It's really hard to build your own clay studio. It's hard to build your own printmaking studio. It gives you that sort of time and also makes you accountable for that time to spend in the studio and to work on, what you're excited about and what you're hoping to grow and create and work toward in your art career. Most residencies offer some sort of financial support that can help lessen that burden of spending valuable time on this. connection with the creative community for us. You know, we've got, like I said, 200 teachers here. We've got thousands of students. It's just a really beautiful way to get embedded in a new community, whether it's VisArts or it's Penland or it's, you know, Haystack or wherever you're going. The connections you make at places, at residencies, can usually last your whole career, and you never know where they're going to go or how they're going to help you. And then, of course, professional networking too. Like, a lot of our residents have stayed on with us. They've maybe become interns or studio monitors, and many of them have become teachers. A few of them have even been hired as part-time staff. And so I think it's a really great way to get to know an organization or get to know a community and decide if you kind of want to become a part of that in a professional way. For us, I think we really saw residencies as a way to fulfill our mission and give back. And what we've discovered is we're getting so much from it as well as an organization. We're getting connected to all these amazing new artists who they're broadening our idea of what can be done in our studios. They're introducing us to their work and other new work. They're introducing us to their communities, and just getting us excited about the art that they're making throughout the year. The picture on this slide is our current 4 annual residents, who are all incredible. And you can read more about them on our website. Because residencies are usually for at least a few months or a year, you really get the chance to build a long-term relationship with that person. And that can be difficult as an organization that's really busy and has a lot of things going on. So this is a way to have like a really focused, you know, professional and personal relationship with artists in your own community. We've learned so much from all of the residents who have come through, either practical things like, hey, maybe we should use this type of screen in the printmaking studio instead of what you guys are doing now, to our last 4 annual writer residents created our VA Poetry Fest last year because they were like, there's no poetry festival and we want to do it. And we're like, okay. So you never know where it's going to take you. Residencies for organizations are also a really beautiful way to fulfill your mission and to show exactly what the impact of your work is. I think because you're able to invest a lot of time and have this long relationship, you're able to really clearly show why your space and your programs matter. And then the obvious one is you're just supporting the greater creative community, because there's a lot of creative people here. And even though there's a lot of residency opportunities in Richmond and beyond, they're all competitive. Like, we all need to chip in and sort of provide the best residency program that we can, and that'll be a good fit for the right artist, right? So I've been talking for a while. I think the main thing I want to plug now is that, and I don't have a slide for this, I'm so sorry, I meant to add it and it did not get added, is that our studio access residency, so that's the 6-month one where you get access to the building, you get a pop-up exhibition, you get skill shares. The applications for our next cohort is open. So the next 6-month residency will start May 1 and run through October. And the applications are open through the end of January. We use Slide Room for all of our applications. We cover the costs of that. It's a completely free process, and it's a pretty easy process. We try to not make it much of a burden. It's just examples of your work, a little bit of a statement from you, and sort of why you want to do this. So I'll plug that. It's on the website. You can see it there, and you can kind of preview the application if you'd like. The annual residency program, that one runs September through July. And applications will open for that on February 5th and close in April. Like I said, that one only welcomes 4 people for 1 year. So that one's a little bit more competitive, just in terms of numbers. The 6-month one, we welcome 15 artists at a time. So I don't know if there's artists on the call who are in this group who want to know more about any of this. I'm happy to answer questions and or just talk more generally about residencies as well.
Thanks so much, Jordan. That was tremendous. Appreciate hearing all about your residency programs. And you answered my question, as you said. Applications are open on the website, and now the website's up on the screen, so folks have access to that. Any questions from the group? You want to put them in the chat, and we can unmute your mics. I know it's early, but you must have some questions. Well, while the group is thinking about theirs, one that came to mind for me, Jordan, two. One is from the artist perspective in these residencies. We may have some people on the call who have never had any experience with residencies whatsoever. And you talked about the financial burden, how VisArts makes an effort to offset some of the financial burden, but isn't able to offset the entire financial burden. What can you describe how past residents have successfully, managed the day-to-day living arrangements, the paying the bills, if you will, to,
Yeah.
on a residency stipend?
Yeah. It's really interesting because it's varied a lot. A couple examples. So one of our current annual residents was actually already a teacher with us, and was known to us already. And so they really offset their artist practice with teaching. And a lot of it is through VisArts. And I know for a lot of our teachers here, they're contract employees. It's kind of like being adjunct at VCU, but it's a lot more flexible in that we sort of create a season of programs at a time. So you can decide, okay, I want to, offer a ton of classes this season, but I kind of got to back off this season because I need to focus on this residency. And so I think a lot of people in our residency programs are educators for that reason. I know that some of our residents in various programs also try to apply for different support on their own as well. So grants through y'all, grants through VCA, other grants throughout, to just get some individual financial support. And then honestly, a lot of our residents, I mean, they have day jobs. They, in our last cohort, one of the sculptors was a full-time woodworker at McKinnon and Harris. And so he worked at night and on the weekends. And so I think all of them, view the residency as a way to make themselves accountable to dedicate a certain amount of hours to their practice. And some of them are able to kind of step back a little bit more from the 9 to 5 or whatever the hours are of their job. And some just figure out how to balance it. One of our past residents was a dad to 3 kids, and he painted all night, and that's how he made it work. So you just never, everyone does it a little bit differently.
Yeah, thank you. That makes it feel more achievable, I think, for some folks. To me, there's an element of where there's a will, there's a way, right?
Right.
I think our artists tend to be very creative problem solvers, and so I just encourage folks to check out these programs and see how you can make it work. And you mentioned CultureWorks grants, as a way that could be a building capabilities grant, if folks are looking at our grants program guidelines. If you have a residency, but you need some additional support to make it work, that you could describe in your application how the residency is going to help you improve your overall skill level, and how the CultureWorks grant might help you make the residency work.
Yeah.
Not making promises that that's a guarantee, but I'm just offering that as a suggestion. It's all about how an artist makes their case.
Well, and I think 2 details too I forgot to mention. One was that the Visual Arts Center, we're open every day of the week from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. So our studio access residents, even though they don't have like a full studio or 24-hour access, they got a lot of hours in the week where we're not teaching classes. And so people who work during the day or people who work during the night, there's always a way to offset it with our schedule. So I think that's one way that we try to be accessible, is that we just try to be, open to whatever people's schedules might be throughout the year.
Great. We do have a question from Cheryl in Ontario. I'm curious, Cheryl, to hear how you heard about us, but she's asking whether you accept applications from whether you accept international applications.
Yeah, well, this is interesting. So we actually have had a couple of international artists involved with us. One of our first in the first sort of group of annual residents, that year-round residency, we had an artist from Canada join us. It so happened that one of our studio access residents last year is actually from Luxembourg, but has family here in Virginia. And in both of those cases, I believe we were able to provide documentation that they had been accepted into this residency to contribute to their visa process so that they could be here. Every person's situation is different and country is different, so we don't really know. We're not the authority on that, but we've been able to contribute to people being able to attend internationally. I think for us, it's often more focused on local regional folks because of the fact we don't offer full-time housing or a full wage for being here. So we just recognize that for most people, it's going to make more sense to do this residency if you're already living in the area or if you're close by. So
Great. Thank you for the question, Cheryl. And thank you for joining us. I'm glad to have folks from Canada joining us. Um, any other questions from the group? And if you're raising a hand, I can't see it. I'm not seeing any hands raised. I'll ask my other question. This is more from an organization perspective. Jordan, you mentioned that the board made a decision to sort of allow attrition in your studio space to then convert them to non-income generating spaces, but rather for these residency programs. Can you talk? We have a couple of organizations, I think, represented on the call. Can you speak to what that conversation was like and how the board reached the conclusion of we're going to forego that revenue and the
income and just figure out how to raise it. But I think the other thing that VisArts has been really fortunate to have been experiencing even before and then after the pandemic is like a lot of growth. So, when I started working here, we were teaching like 600 classes a year. Our budget was like 1.7 million. And now we're teaching 1,500 classes a year and our budget is 2.6 million. And so we've just had like a lot of growth, and that has allowed us to be a little bit more nimble and take some risks in that, like, this studio that gives us whatever it is, $10,000 a year, $5,000 a year, is not really critical to our financial success. And what could be more critical or more impactful is the programmatic sort of cultural impact of what this residency program has done. Because I think what I've tried to articulate, but maybe haven't done it as well as I could, is that the residency programs have been pretty transformational to VisArts' identity, in that it is welcoming in people who otherwise probably wouldn't have been in the building with us, right? Like people who saw our classes and were like, oh, that's not really for me, or they weren't ready to teach yet, but they were interested. So it's been this way to bring in a very diverse pool of people who sort of find the right place, the right opportunity in which to engage with us. And then from there, they grow their own skills or figure out how they want to be further engaged. And then, like I said, they become teachers, staff members, studio monitors, things like that. And then it's just created a lot of connection between people in different programs and created more activity and community in each studio. You'll walk into the printmaking or clay space, and there's a group of people in there just working on their own things independently and having conversations with each other. So I think we were able to sort of pitch that to the board and just be like, all right, we're making up for this revenue in this way. We feel confident our budget is still not at risk, and here's what we see as the potential positive impact of what this type of program.
That's a great example of an organization to me looking at what its core mission is and what supports that core mission and what are maybe some of the things that are not extraneous, but maybe not as impactful to that mission, you know, and then making decisions to use it in a more impactful way. I think that's a perfect example.
Thank
Any
you.
other
Yeah.
questions? I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, that's fine. I was just gonna say, like, it's um things like renting spaces and doing, sort of non-mission based income, I think is a really important thing to look at, because there's often a more creative solution that's more mission aligned that can give you that same revenue or impact. So we've been trying to do that kind of at every turn as much as we can.
That's great. Obviously, it depends on how big a revenue source it is too.
Right,
That's how much of an opportunity that might be. Um,
right.
any other questions from the group? Going once, twice, three times a lady. All right. Well, I think with that, a reminder for anybody that might have joined late, we are recording this session and we'll have it, to me, we'll have it available up on our website probably within the next week or so. Is that reasonable to me? Great. And so feel free to access that, and all the past coffee hours are there as well. So we invite you to take a look at that. Jordan, thank you so much for sharing your experience with us. I greatly appreciate the discussion. And be sure to check out all the residency programs. The applications are online at their website, and you have that on the screen. And a reminder to all of our artists, check out the CultureWorks grant applications that open up February 1st, and those guidelines are also available on our website, which is richmondcultureworks.org. All right, thanks everyone. Let's make it a great week and a great
Yeah.
year. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you everyone for joining.